Hello and welcome to GuyLogic. My name is Temko and this is Mafia 3. Now before we dive into the game further, I just want to say that this recording is of the game after the 1.01 patch, which means certain stability issues have been fixed that were prevalent during the release window on Friday. As you'll note that the game has serious performance issues, and even with the addition of a 30, 60 and unlimited FPS lock, it is very hard to get the game to run on a stable 60 FPS even on high or medium settings. The game's performance and the game's optimization for both its PC build, as far as I can tell, as well as its console builds, is abysmal. The game's also riddled with quite a few glitches and bugs in a variety of game-breaking moments, and it still has various crash to desktop situations. Outside of these points though, I have a lot of things in the game that I really enjoy, but from a pure performance standpoint, the game's release is definitely a bit of a mess. So be warned if you're looking at purchasing this game that while the developers are definitely working on patching these things, they should not have been there in the first place. So before anything else, let's go ahead and dive into the options menu and talk about the PC performance and everything like that. As I said, this is recorded after the 1.01 patch, so there's already some changes to the options menu available for players to play around with compared to the released version a few days ago. And if you're not so inclined to join me in the options menu and PC performance talk, you can press the annotation on screen and skip straight on ahead. So let's get started in controls. Now controls have some very cool things, like you can look inversion, aim assist. I put mine to low because I'm terrible at this sort of thing, but I do enjoy having a toggle here for players to play the game as they deem fit. A really cool thing. Vibration off, which is logical as I'm not using a controller. I have mouse and controller sensitivity at default, and the same goes for keyboard remapping. Everything is set to default. Now 1.01 has updated these control settings to be way better than they were a few days ago, with all controls being in a single window instead of 5 different menus. A very good advantage. They've also redone most of the default control bindings for things such as interacting, for things such as aiming your guns, for things such as interacting with like the radio station and stuff like that. So all of that is pretty good. I feel these new control defaults are much better than the previous ones, which were quite insane and useless. So I do like them. Currently, I have no reason to suggest changing the default control settings unless you have some other preferences, but they work quite well overall. If we head back from the controls menu and head into the gameplay menu, you'll also notice that I have the difficulty, driving modes, and melee takedowns available. Now, melee takedowns is something I am not a great fan of in this fashion, because it doesn't allow you to make decisions logically in the game while playing regarding the kind of a takeout you want to do on a specific target. Maybe you're working on a specific mob type, or maybe you're working on a specific enemy, and you might want to spare that enemy compared to some other enemy in a non-lethal or lethal fashion. And for now, the game forces you to go into the options menu to change this around. Not something I'm a great fan of. The driving mode as well is quite cool, that allows you to switch between what we are used to in games such as GTA or Saints Row, and a driving mode that is much more like a simulation driving, which simulates more physics X driving, which you would get in a actual racing game quite well. And then obviously the difficulty mode. Now difficulty mode also involves AI. And this game's strong suit isn't exactly the AI and hard difficulties. The AI is quite predictable in most situations, but it does react a lot faster on higher difficulties, meaning that you do actually end up having more challenge in sneaking around or fooling the police and stuff like that, as opposed to lower difficulties, which is a good thing. But from a combat standpoint or a flanking or teamwork standpoint for the AI, that really doesn't change that much between difficulties. It's mostly how fast they react that change around a little bit, which is fine in and of itself, but not perfect. And then you have various things like camera and game language. If we head to display settings, there's been a new toggle here for FPS. I've locked mine to 30. You can do 60 or unlimited FPS. The reason it's locked to 30 for this recording is because, quite frankly, there's no way I can get this thing to run at stable 60. As I said in the start of this video, PC performance is abysmal, and that is a damn shame. Everything else is pretty much as it was, with various options all around. Field of view is 90 degrees. I've upped it up all the way, which is fine in and of itself. It is a third-person game, so you don't really feel that tightening or the idea of being claustrophobic that you would have with a first-person game, so no issues here at all. And then we have full screen on or off, VSync, and all the other options you are used to. Anti-aliasing though is a little bit weird because it just says low, medium, high and doesn't tell you what kind of anti-aliasing it is, which is definitely a bit of a shame. I would have liked some tooltips, some extra information regarding things here, which we've seen in some other games as well, that they explain sort of, oh, this one has a lot of impact on your game and this one has very little impact, and this is really heavy on the PC side for your processor or your graphics card or stuff like that. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. Nothing too insane, but nothing special either. Par for the course for a AAA release. And lastly, we go to audio settings, and this is pretty much as complete as it gets, with master, music, dialogue, SFX volume, cinematics volume, and dynamic range. The only one I would turn down quite a bit is music volume, because I feel this is often overpowering in many situations, especially when you're driving a car and the radio turns on. Everything else is pretty much what you'd expect it to be. Other than that though, that is really it about the options menu. And again, I want to reiterate that the number of bugs and issues with the game and the abhorrent PC performance is a very valid reason not to purchase the title. But if you feel you have a machine strong enough, or you have the stomach to handle 30 FPS, then let's go ahead and dive into the gameplay, and I'll talk to you about the amazing masterpiece that developers have made out of the other aspects of the game. So the first thing I want to note when you get into the game is the art style and world building that developers have done. And before we dive into the old open world gameplay aspect of Mafia 3, I want to take a look at the city and the way they've constructed it, because for a open world city-like game with gangsters and mafia, this is very important. Something that GTA has done a tremendously good job of is creating a city that feels alive and vibrant, and then giving it a setting that fits coherently within the world. Obviously, it's far from realistic in any way or regard, but it does fit together quite well. And even Saints Row, with its utter insanity that has gone way off the sidetrack with everything, still has a very coherent world overall. So there's very little to complain about when you look at those worlds and say, oh, well, this doesn't fit in that world because of reasons, or this is very weird for some contrived reason. Those games don't really have that, which makes them excellent open world titles. Now for Mafia 3, this goes double, because holy hell have they done an amazing job on creating this world. The fictional city of New Bordeaux feels and acts like what you'd expect if you watched old mafia movies like The Godfather and stuff like that. Everything feels so nice, and the 60s, 70s era of style in terms of cars, in terms of quality of audio, in terms of speech, in terms of weapons, in terms of the way things work is so well put together that everything fits as such a nice coherent whole that you can really imagine it being in the late 60s for the US in a fictional city. But this could be Chicago, this could be Detroit, this could be St. Louis, this could be anywhere in the USA. It really fits quite well together, and everything ties in together with that as well. It talks about racial tensions. It really has no reason to shy away from all the various things that would make this game a bit lackluster for political reasons for today. The game bandies about racist terms and racist actions. Segregation is still massively a thing between blacks and whites. On the street, when you are in a neighborhood such as the Hollows and you call the police, or somebody else calls the police on you, the police operator over the radio will say something along the lines of, oh, somebody got murdered in the Hollows and you can go ahead and check it out if you are so inclined, Mr. Cops. Or, leave them be, they're just blacks or niggers or spics or, coons or whatever else terms they normally use in many games or movies or in real life to insult people or to insult other people. The game doesn't shy away from using those terms. And that somehow, because it's so casual in the way they use it, as you'd expect it to be in a situation in real life, where these were the norm for interaction with people, it makes everything feel more alive, and it really gives a new level of clarity and a new level of feeling for the world, where you suddenly feel less like you're the bad guy and robbing things. You feel like you are wrong. You feel like the world is against you, because it is. And you have no recourse to go to the police because somebody killed your parents. You're black. Nobody's going to take you seriously. They're going to laugh you off and send you on your way. So you have to take the law in your own hands and move forward with that. Everything makes coherent sense in the world. From graphics to music to world building to character interaction to everything. Now there is one part of the world I don't like as much, which is the fact that many buildings cannot be entered. Now there's quite a few buildings you can enter, but the vast majority of those serve no real purpose other than maybe a collectible pickup, which is something that many open world games have made sort of a staple of. You only have to look at Ubisoft titles such as Assassin's Creed and open up your world map in those games, and that basically explode in the amount of collectibles and gimmicks and pickups you can get anywhere on the map just to keep you busy while you're running around in the world with a lackluster story. Now, while Mafia 3 isn't that bad in terms of that, such as Assassin's Creed is, it still has quite a few collectibles and has quite a few things in the world that are mostly busy work to have you run around and pretend that, no, this is a real planet and you can really do a lot of cool stuff, and that all impacts it, when it really boils down to collecting objects and getting money, which is fine in and of itself, but that does get old after a while. Thankfully, the buildings you can enter in many situations that are marked for that do have some interesting things to look at. The interior of the buildings isn't copy and paste, and I haven't found many coffee shops or bars or homes that look exactly alike. There's definitely a large number of variants within the interior and world building of the game. Very, very well put together overall. Moving away from the world building is a bit of the combat system. So within the combat of the game, I do see lots of resemblances. I do see a lot of concessions made in regards to console releases, especially in the way weapon loadouts work and the way you interact with certain objects. For example, you can only carry 2 weapons on you at any given time, a pistol and a secondary firearm, such as a sniper rifle or a machine gun. And everything is bound to those couple of things, and calling up new weapons requires you to go into a radio menu, call a weapons dealer that you will be able to call anywhere on the map for convenience sake, and then switching out weapons on any moment. You can't carry multiple weapons with you. You can't switch between weapons using the number keys on a keyboard like a game such as Doom would have. It really has quite a few concessions to account for the fact that a controller on a console can only have so many buttons and interactions at any given time. Like moving from stealth location to stealth location and interacting with enemies and interacting such as taking them down and stuff like that is again very well put together. Especially non-lethal takedowns do have a very nice feel to them, where you are taking down an enemy and you see him groaning and shooting an enemy with a gun in his legs repeatedly so he falls down eventually, and even if he dies from leg wounds, he'll still be moaning and rolling on the ground after you take him out, indicating that no, he's not really dead yet, but he's bleeding out and he'll be dead really soon, as opposed to you taking someone out by a bullet to the head, which instantly makes him drop over dead. There's quite a bit of detail and effort put into the way combat interaction work, much like they've put a tremendous amount of detail in the way person-to-person interaction works. Very, very cool. Another thing that the combat system does really well is combat in vehicles. Now, this is something I've never liked about GTA and other games, is that combat in vehicles often felt very lackluster compared to combat on foot. And I would often just get out of my car and start shooting cops, just because the combat while driving away from them was basically terrible. In Mafia 3, they have done a very cool thing where if you're driving a car and you're trying to shoot someone, you can aim on different parts of the car and you can switch what you're aiming at. So you can aim the wheel, you can aim at the engine, you can aim at the driver, and you can take them out if you are careful where you're aiming, resulting in you being able to kill an enemy while driving a car, which is really, really cool. Something I've not seen or had much success with in games like GTA or Saints Row. Even from a sound and music aspect, even though I think the music is quite often overpowering in many scenarios, the game feels very well put together. The guns feel great on all their ranges, and even when you are close and throw a grenade, you have that distinct ringing in your ears of your character if the grenade was too close. And throwing a grenade in the water also creates that dull thud, as if you would blow up a firecracker under a lake. Very, very well put together, and no complaints there at all. This is a AAA release, and it shows and tells in all the ways that you would expect a AAA release to look and feel. No complaints at all. Now, moving away from those two things, the game is very heavy on its story focus. And that is a good thing in my opinion, because it is going to have to compete with games like GTA that have a very large install base and a very loyal fan base. And while Mafia 3 is very well in its own right, it still has to compete with those games because on the surface, it looks very familiar to those titles. Thankfully, if you look a little bit below the surface on Mafia 3, the story-driven aspect of this game is amazing. This game has an open world with a story that is as griping as the one The Witcher 3 had. Very well put together, and while you don't have many choices you make in regards to story progression in deciding how you deal with certain things, there are still quite a few things you can achieve in the course of a game to improve your standing with various gangs, or to even decide how you're going to run certain things in certain regions. The game leaves a lot of freedom to you in regards to how you want to express how you feel in this game as the main protagonist. Now, there's one thing though that, because it is story driven, you have very little control over how your character looks. You're always playing Lincoln Clay, and he always looks exactly the same. And while this is okay for me, as I enjoy games that have a very defined protagonist, I understand that many people enjoy the freedom that games like Skyrim provide you in creating your own adventure with your own look or cast of characters. And this game does not provide that, but it does provide a very, very well put together story with a very cohesive narrative in a very cohesive world. And it just feels alive and really well put together. The characters you interact with feel human. They're not stand pieces standing around. Very, very, very well put together. No complaints at all in this regard. That a lot of the time you'll be spending doing useless side objectives to get to the main core of it. A good example is that there are boxes where you can wiretap certain regions and then get extra information in that neighborhood. And you collect these objects on the ground and then put them in a wiretapping cabinet, and you do this all over. But every wiretap cabinet has to be broken into by you using a crowbar. And this crowbar is a mini game that is as basic as they get. A little bar shows up, you have to aim it when it turns green, and then it shows up again, and you have to press E when it's in the green area, and that is it. And after the 20th or 30th time you do this, it just really gets tedious and boring, and you just want to continue. And a variety of animations in regards to this are also overly long in my opinion. They just hold you back from going on. Now sometimes there's a very good case to be made for extended animations. A good example is combat, where you have lethal and non-lethal takedowns, or even things like picking up an enemy or throwing over your shoulder that have a defined set of time they need to be placed in. This is very good when you have combat interactions or when you're trying to sneak, that you have to account for certain things such as how long does it take me to subdue this enemy, and will the other guard that's on patrol see me in the meantime before I can get out of sight again? Will he even notice me? But for something like block boxes, there is no reason for it to take upwards of 30 to 40 seconds just to wiretap one so you can go on your merry way to the next one and the next one and the next one. It just results in them being annoying, you not doing them, and then missing out on interesting content, especially interesting dialogue and bits and hidden information. And the same goes for many of the collectibles you can find in many of the regions. While the game doesn't overload you with them like a game such as Assassin's Creed does, it still has quite a few of them in quite a few spots, and finding them is, while not difficult, does require you to spend an inordinate amount of time running around back and forth just to pick up objects in one location or another. This is not something I personally ever enjoyed doing because, generally speaking, and same goes for this game, all those collectibles don't really provide any in-game benefit. You don't get better ammo, you don't get better guns, you don't get more life or health or anything like that from getting those collectibles. They just sort of get collected. Now there are ways to upgrade your character, and that is something I do enjoy in this game quite a bit. As you progress through the story and various side objectives and side missions and optional objectives, you can upgrade your various regions and their gangs involved. And every time you level them up, so to say, you unlock new benefits, both yourself and your gangs. So you unlock benefits where your aim gets better, and you're unlocking benefits where you get more health bars. You're unlocking benefits where you can carry more medkits, more ammo. All of this is really well put together, which is great because that allows you to customize your character where you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on getting upgrades for racketeering so you get more money? Do you want to focus on upgrading your health and weapons? And every time you have an object, you can put more points into that and unlock secondary objectives. One of the things that you unlock along the way is various ways to call in help. I earlier mentioned a weapons dealer that you can call in and then use to get more weapons, to refill ammo, to buy new guns. Guns you also unlock by completing quests and completing side objectives for various underbosses that work for you. And then you get rewards and gifts and bonuses from them to unlock new weapons and new armor. The game doesn't have much in the way of customizing your character or customizing your loadout or gear. You have 2 weapons you select and that's really it. But it does have a customization system a little bit for the way you look and the way your cars look. Not extensive at all, and developers have mentioned that they are adding new options in the near future. But when this is coming, nobody yet knows, and for now it's not in the game. Meaning that if you don't like the way your character looks, your options are fairly limited. And that again is a bit of a shame. There's no real reason why you can't change the way your protagonist looks, at least in terms of the clothing department. And often the character looks strangely out of place in many situations, especially when you're running around in a rich white neighborhood wearing your military jacket with your torn jeans. No real reason for that. Now, speaking about the different neighborhoods in the world and how they interact, I already mentioned that different world building elements will result in different interactions. Police that come faster or slower depending on the location, and that same goes really for the ways and things you find there. Cafes in rich neighborhoods simply have more money in the cash register than those in poor neighborhoods, and that is again a really cool aspect of the game, which rewards you a little bit in going into these richer neighborhoods if you need some extra cash or spending money. And this also ties into the main way the game deals with you dying or failing an objective. The game doesn't allow you to save on the fly, but it does have a large number of checkpoints. And while this is good in some ways and bad in other ways, it means that if you're wandering around for a long time just exploring and you die, you could be set back quite a bit. Doesn't mean your exploration and the things you've done are disappeared. No, they do save them and you do keep them, but you do lose a bunch of money. And if you're in the middle of a mission and you are dead before a checkpoint, that does reset that mission. But any ammo or money you have spent during that mission or any objectives you may have unlocked during that mission are still available to you. So in that regard, the game is very light on penalizing you for dying, which in an open world game I feel is never a really bad thing. But I feel the game challenge really drops a little bit when the only death penalty you have is a loss of currency. And as you can call a courier to bring away the money you have in your wallet to a safe, which is not touched but you can still spend on the fly, the risk of dying and the consequences of dying are very minor. And while in many open world games this is always the situation, I always feel this sort of reduces the challenge and complexity of a game quite a bit, from something that you have to be careful of doing into a run and gun situations where you can bash your head into an opponent several times, time and time again, with no real consequence, because even if you have no money in your wallet, there's no real penalty. So overall, I am quite pleased with what they have done with the title in terms of both its interaction, in terms of its story, and in terms of the way it deals with certain things such as racial issues. It doesn't shy away from using hard language, it doesn't shy away from displaying blatant racism, it doesn't shy away from any of those things. No fear at all to dive in and expose these things as they would be in this fictional land and as they were during that period of time in US history. Now, unlike GTA 5, I feel that the stuff you can do in the open world overall is fairly limited. There are gangs you can kill, and there are spots you can go to and get collectibles, and there are objects you can go to and get money or unlock items, but there isn't a lot more than that. Because the game is so heavy on its story focus, there often isn't a case where you'll be doing a side objective or stumble upon something and unlock a new weapon. All of that is handled throughout stories and side objectives, which you can always find on your map and deal with it that way. And while there are some side objectives that help out the various underbosses in your region and help out the various aspects of creating, for example, a stronger gang and getting more money out of your various rackets, all these are very minor things that don't provide a direct bonus to you as a player. They'll increase a little bit of the output you get from getting money, which is fine and good enough itself and is a reward, but is not exactly satisfying. So that is a bit of a shame. To move into there, let's head back to the PC performance and talk about how the world building has been affected by that. Because I feel this is one of the major things that developers have failed at, is making the world feel full. While the world does definitely feel alive and a variety of characters available definitely don't shy away from interacting with you in any way, shape or form, in many situations you'll be running around through empty lots, empty buildings, empty offices, empty cafes, empty bars, with just one proprietor and maybe one guest inside. And this is the same situations that some other open world games have had, where they had to drastically cut down on the number of NPCs available in the world, simply because the game couldn't run or handle it properly. Now, often the case was cited as consoles being too weak to do it, but in the situation of the PC release, these various NPCs are still not available even though they could have, and again, because the PC performance is so bad, it's probably better that they're not yet available or not available at all, because the game would literally be unplayable. So this results in the fact that many locations seem dead and empty, with no mechanics being available in a car park, with no people being on the street, maybe homeless or otherwise available. And the few people walking around in the street often seem recycled for a certain neighborhood. I have seen several people run around repeatedly in the same little block of locations, simply to give the appearance that they might be doing something. So from a technical standpoint, the world simulation feels great, but is severely lacking in terms of inhabitants. The same really applies for cars on the road as well as parked cars and other interactive objects. Things like doors you can open to go to locations are just way fewer than there should be. Sometimes these doors are openable from one location to another, but the door next to them isn't openable even though they're part of the same building. And I don't see a particularly good reason why this might be the case outside of reducing some overhead in the amount of objects rendered for the PC performance, or as the case may be, for all types of performance in all systems. And the same goes for cars on a road or highway. Yes, there's cars on the road and you'll have incoming traffic and outgoing traffic, but I've never had situations that have occurred in Grand Theft Auto or any other game where there's a traffic jam or a large number of cars in a certain spot creating a gridlock, or anything of the sort. It's always one or two cars, maybe one cop, maybe two cops, and any more than that really affects the performance in a negative way. In certain scenarios where you have a police chase, it is quite normal to have 5 or 6 police cars after you, and you can notice that feeling in your FPS. Now obviously if you're playing on 30 FPS, you won't notice it as fast, but if you're playing to unlocked FPS, the difference between 1 police car chasing you and being in sight and 5 is a clear notable drop in FPS, in my situations up to 10 to 15 FPS, and that is a damn shame. And again, it does boil down to PC performance, and I really do wish that the developer had spent more time refining the title in terms of its performance, in terms of the bugs and issues that the title is infested with, because as it stands, it is a wonderful world with a griping story that deals with some real world issues that were back then a major point of contention both politically and within society, and then even today are still a hotly contested and debated subject. And the game does a tremendously good job of portraying that in a very, very good manner without being politically inclined either way. Really, really well put together. And then they muck it up by having absolutely dreadful PC performance and by drastically apparently cutting down on moving objects and NPC AI enemies, which is a damn shame. Talking about NPC and AI enemies, as I mentioned earlier during the options menu, the AI of the game is quite good, but not perfect. It does work together with its comrades, it does flank you, it does use a variety of weapons, and it does use rudimentary tactics as available. The only major difference I've been noticing between medium and high difficulty settings is that the AI reacts much faster to scenarios. And I don't mean just the AI reacting faster as a enemy AI for combat, I mean that for the AI in general. If you are robbing a car, a NPC will be much faster to grab the phone to call the cops. If you are chased by the cops, they'll be much more efficient in cornering you. If you end up with a situation where you are fighting enemies, they'll more easily flank you or call reinforcements. Their aim will be better, their actions are faster, and there's less delay between them. That is the major difference between lower difficulty settings and higher difficulty settings. But the AI doesn't improve its tactics. It doesn't try to flank you from two sides. It doesn't try to flush you out with grenades or Molotov cocktails outside of just randomly using them on occasion within its programming, and that is a bit of a shame. Another aspect that I find strangely annoying in the game, but that does fit with the world, is how the way you handle underbosses. A good example is in certain scenarios you will be given a quest to interrogate a enemy NPC. So you have to go in, either kill everyone around him or sneak away to him and then interrogate that NPC. The situation is often that you can rush the NPC and start interrogating him on the fly while there is enemies shooting at you, who will then stop shooting while you're in interrogation and then just disappear from the map when you finish your interrogation because that quest segment is complete. And while I do understand where they're coming from in that regard, because it would be very strange if during an interrogation you get shot to death when you can't do anything because you're locked into that interrogation, it is still very weird that you can just rush a building or rush a camp, find a target, and just start interrogating him by pressing Q and interacting with him while enemies are shooting you. There's also several other minor things that happen in the game that aren't great, but they don't detract from the overall gameplay experience. A few times that I've died in the middle of a quest, I've gone to a different spot in the game with that same quest, and then I come across the wreckage of the same car I'm driving now, as object didn't get despawned. In a certain other scenario where I was using a boat and crashed and died, and then went back for a new boat, I found my old boat upside down burning carcass in the water, which was really strange, and that resulted in me not being able to complete that quest, even though the quest was still marked on the map. So overall, Mafia 3 does some tremendously amazing things in both setting, story, and cohesion. I've not had a griping world as this since Witcher 3, and that says a lot. But from a technical standpoint, the game drops quite a few balls and needs serious patching to fix many of the performance issues, if indeed they can be fixed at all. From a gameplay perspective and AI perspective, especially for a AAA, the game does a great job of conveying the ideas and interesting mechanics. And while the game doesn't have a lot of open world game objectives like many other open world games, this isn't a bad thing in my opinion. It just does feel like the world is smaller than it actually is in many scenarios, which also applies for the various non-interactive buildings and the various other things in the world that are just sort of storefronts for you to run by while you go on to your merry way to the next quest. So Mafia 3 is, in my opinion, a great title for the lover of open world games of this kind, but it is deeply flawed in its technical performance, and as such, I would hesitate to recommend buying the title in its current form due to the technical issues. But if those technical issues are not a problem to you, such as the 30 FPS performance and various other issues such as bugs and crashes, or you can deal with those while the developers patch them, this game is tremendous amounts of fun and portrays a world unlike many others, and does a great job of doing so. So Mafia 3 came out last Friday, October 7th, for the normal $60 AAA release price. The game will probably be having a bunch of DLC because it already has a season pass, as expected for most AAAs. And as always, you have to decide for yourself whether or not you want to invest into a full-scale release for a game like this. The production quality is there outside of the PC performance, and you can check it out over on Steam. So thank you for watching. If you liked this video, press the like button below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And leave a comment. Tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. Until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogic.